in each of our minds that we would like you to address. Ladies, we will now open the floor to all of you. Please be very, very precise in your questions. My team will address you, help you with the mics. However, before we begin, I think two questions have already come to me. So let me quickly ask ma'am one of those. Ma'am, this question comes from a very sweet member of our group, Jyotsna Angara. The core values and organizational culture of any company is considered to be key to its growth and sustenance. Is work culture the one thing that India needs to change? How does one go about changing that entrenched organizational culture that does not support the growth of the company?
How does one support a culture?
How does one go about changing that entrenched organizational culture that does not support the growth of the company?
So I'm assuming from this question, whoever asked is, that there is a company that already exists, which is not supporting the values of growth. Is that?
It is not necessarily supporting the values that it should, that is aligned with its vision. Then how do you go about it?
Well, if it is your company, then you change. If it is not your company, then you try your best to influence that change. And if after trying your best, you can't do it, then you've got to go away and find someplace else that is going to be supportive of your values. One thing is for sure, that those companies that behave, it's a question of there are people who say what they do and do what they say. The same thing is with companies. Companies have to be credible, companies have to be consistent, people are very smart. I can't be a company that says we value our people and then go and fire everybody every other day. Nobody's going to believe what I say. Like somebody said, your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear your words. So it is about your actions and your words being consistent with each other. If you are the promoter, the entrepreneur, then you create the values, you set the tone, you set the culture. If on the other hand, let's say you're a professional or you're an employee, and you find that the way senior leadership of the company, usually it's the senior leadership, it's not the juniors, the senior leadership of the company is not behaving in a manner which is consistent with those values. And if you are part of that senior leadership, you must have the guts and the courage to call it out. And we must do that, because if we don't, then we become part of them. Very often, it takes a lot of courage, but then if you want to change something, it does take a lot of courage. You do your best to influence and change that. It is not out of emotion. It is out of data. It is out of, it's a question of what people are actually doing. It's facts and data and how people are conducting themselves. And if despite that you feel that it's not making a difference to anybody, then you say, okay, I am not going to waste my energy and my time trying to change something where intrinsically people don't want to change. Then you've got to go and find a place that is consistent with your values, consistent with what you want to do. Okay?
In relation with this, it becomes more sticky if it's a family business. How does one sort that out?
I could turn around and say that because it is family business, your ability to be able to change that should actually be higher, not lower. Because if you can't change things which are part of the family, imagine trying to change things which are outside the family. Now, easier said than done. Any kind of transformational change requires, first of all, clarity on your part. The first thing you've got to test out is to say, are you the only one who's feeling like that, or there are other people also feeling like that? You've got to be able to have a very good way of assessing, what is going on in the family. I think the second thing is that in any kind of change management, you'll never bring about change by saying, you're doing it this way, I think it's wrong, and this is the way to do it. People will turn around and say, go fly a kite. This is the way we've been doing it, and we've been very, very successful. So I think that emotional maturity, that emotional quotient, how you're going to have a dialogue with some of the elders in the family that will cause them to see things differently is something that you have to think about. Because the one thing that a lot of people say, and the one thing that most people are resistant to is change. You go and ask anybody, they'll say, yeah, I really think we need to change. Try changing that person. Nobody wants to change because we all love our comfort zone. We will all rationalize why it is important to do things the way we are doing them now and not something else, because it requires great courage to change. So change management, whether it is a family business or a professional business, is a long-term path. It's not going to happen because you're the youngest and you've got an MBA and you'll come and tell your uncles or great uncles or great aunts, what we've been doing is wrong, this is the way to do it. Nobody's going to listen to you. You have to be sensitive. You have to show them another way of doing things. You have to do it with sensitivity. You have to do it sensibly. You have to make yourself credible before somebody starts listening to you. Because, none of us have the divine right to be listened to. People must feel that, yes, you bring an added dimension. People must feel that, yes, you bring a new perspective. People must feel that with your perspective, they can get further than they've been getting with their own perspective. So there is also a strategy on managing change. And it's not going to happen just because you wish it to be. It doesn't happen in professional organizations. Trust me, I can tell you. I had a transformational role in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Chile, in Britannia. It took me 5 to 6 years to make any of that happen.
Very insightful, thank you. Ma'am, coming to my question.
Oh, I thought that was your question.
Read from there. Have there been any times when you actually felt like throwing the towel in? And
when I felt really?
Throwing the towel in, saying this, I've had enough. And if so, how did you rededicate yourself?
I never felt like throwing the towel in.
Wow, that's something.
Honestly, I didn't. So, can't answer that question. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Being a leader means you have to demand, command, and reprimand. So how do you deal in the third situation where sometimes you have to fire a staff for being incompetent or, warn a person who's not meeting the deadlines? If you're an emotional person, then I think this situation is the most difficult to handle, So I would just like to know what is the solution and how to tackle such a situation. Thank you so much.
I don't think about demand, command, reprimand. That's not... No, I don't. Okay, so I think leadership is about being effective. Okay, and being effective is more than demand, command, and reprimand. Being effective is about being inspirational. Being effective is about motivating people. Being effective is about living the behaviors that you want others to follow. Being effective is about finding which is the best way to get things done. Part of it is, being demanding of people and so on. I'm not denying that. See, that is a function of now, if people don't want to listen to you, there's nothing you can do about it. Okay? That is why I'm saying it is about effectiveness more than it is about demanding or commanding. Even teachers in school can't get children to behave the way they want them to behave. So what is important is to say, what does effectiveness mean in a situation like this? And every human being is different. I might take reprimand in my stride, but someone else who's more sensitive may not take reprimand in their style. And then what do? So being a leader is about having empathy. Being a leader is about having the inspiration to set goals where people say, yes, we are going to follow those. Being a leader is about sensitivity. Being a leader is about understanding what motivates each of your people and dealing with them on an individual basis rather than using one size fits all. For some people, you have to reprimand, and that's the only way they'll learn. For some people, you have to really edge them on and, get them to perform to greater heights. But the most important job of a leader is to have empathy. If a leader does not have empathy, then it's very hard to get people to do work. Try getting your maid who comes to cook, to do work by demanding, commanding, and reprimanding. She'll leave your job and go and find another job. So it is not about that. Now, I'm not saying you have to be at the receiving end of anything. I think as a leader, you have to make expectations very clear. Leaders have to communicate clearly and precisely. Leaders have to set goals which are unambiguous. Leaders have to show the rest of the people in the organization a path on how to get there from here. Leaders have to demand excellence. Leaders have to support. Leaders have to inspire. So leadership is a big responsibility, of which the three things that you mentioned are small pieces of that big task of leadership. You can get a lot more out of people when you inspire them. So people work out of inspiration or people work out of fear. You don't want to be a leader who is feared and therefore people look up to you. You want to be a leader where people truly look up to you because you do something good for them. That is when they will give their best to you. Out of fear, people don't give their best. Out of inspiration, people give their best.
Ms. Bali, I had a question. I was just wondering, with your experience internationally, nowadays we have a lot more number of women leaders that we're seeing in our country. Is there any difference, do you feel, with women leaders in our country compared to our global counterparts? You already said that as Indian women leaders, we do have some advantages with the extended family support system, maybe even help. But besides that, are there any advantages, disadvantages? Do you feel that is there anything that from an international perspective that we can actually take lessons from or that others can learn from us?
There aren't differences, but obviously there are differences in culture. So for example, European and American men share a lot of the household work that Indian men don't. But in India, we have mother-in-laws and servants doing our work, which they don't there. So, barring those kinds of things, I don't think obviously cultures are different. But if you're sensitive to a culture, the motivations of people are the same, whether you're in Scandinavia or you're in India. People get inspired, people get motivated, people have great attitudes or not great attitudes. So all of those things are human conditions. They are not India versus something else. And I think understanding that human condition about, why people do what they do is very, very important, irrespective of the culture that you're in. I mean, even in India, what is acceptable in the north may or may not be acceptable in the east or the south and so on. So I think having that sensitivity and having that empathy is very important. And then you've got to use the best in your cultural support system to work to your advantage. I used to joke at one time where we said that, behind every successful man is a woman, and I used to say, and behind every successful woman is a maidservant. And that is very true, because, what they do for us is they liberate us from doing a lot of the tasks that women in other cultures have to do, because, they don't have that thing available. So my point is, we have to manage the ecosystem that we have in a manner which is smart, and in a manner where we are not putting ourselves out too much. I think one of the things that Indian women don't do enough of is that we are not as demanding as we ought to be of other people, chipping in and sharing the roles and fulfilling their responsibilities. Indian women somehow feel that they are the ones, they are the pivot around which everything has to be balanced. And that's not necessarily so. Indian women feel that they have to be at home when their kids come back from work. There are many working women I know, whose kids grew up from the age of 6 months knowing that mother travels and father travels, and sometimes mom's not going to be at home and sometimes dad's not going to be at home. And those kids grow up just fine. We feel that we have to be around our kids. They don't necessarily want us around them, not all the time. So I think, and there is no one size fits all. You have to determine in your situation what works, but you also have to be demanding. You can't say that I'm going to do with 4 hours of sleep, but I'm going to be the perfect mom, the perfect entrepreneur, the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, and so on. It's impossible.